Hello everyone, welcome back to another scary story. Your place where we uncover the darkest mysteries in a calming and reflective way. For the next hour, I want you to put on your earphones, put your phone face down, and close your eyes. Relax, and let this story take you to a world full of chills and mystery. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Daniel Carter. I live in a small town in Montana with my wife, Ariana. She's 6 months pregnant, and after everything we've been through, this pregnancy feels like a miracle. We lost our first child, Noah, only a few days after he was born. The doctors never found a clear cause. It was as if he simply faded away. One night he was breathing softly in his crib, and by morning he was gone. Losing Noah shattered us. I still wake up at night, expecting to hear his cries from the nursery down the hall. The silence is worse. Ariana fell into deep grief, barely speaking for months. I spent my nights driving aimlessly, the empty roads offering no comfort. Desperate for something, anything, we turned to the church. Neither of us had been particularly religious, but when you've lost everything, faith becomes your last hope. Father Michael, the local priest, listened to our sorrow. He told us to pray, to trust that God had a plan. It felt hollow at first, but Ariana clung to his words, and slowly, something shifted. Then months later, Ariana became pregnant again. The doctors were baffled. They had warned us after Noah that having another child would be nearly impossible. Yet here she was, carrying life within her again. As a way to celebrate, we decided to take a short trip. Nothing extravagant, just a peaceful getaway before the baby arrived. Ariana had always wanted to visit the Italian countryside, so we planned a quiet vacation in Tuscany. We arrived in mid-September, the rolling hills bathed in golden sunlight. The air smelled of cypress trees and wild lavender. We rented a small villa near a vineyard, owned by an old Italian couple who spoke little English but welcomed us warmly. For the first time in a long time, Ariana smiled, and I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. One afternoon, while exploring the hills, we found an old dirt path leading into a dense forest. A sign nearby, half buried in the ground, read, "Casale Abbandonato," abandoned farmhouse. Something about it intrigued me. Maybe it was the way the ivy crawled up the stones, or the eerie silence that surrounded the place. Ariana hesitated, but I convinced her to follow me. The trees thickened as we walked, the sunlight barely cutting through the branches. The air grew damp, the scent of moss and old wood filling our noses. Then, through the trees, we saw it, the farmhouse. It stood there like a forgotten relic, its stone walls crumbling, the wooden shutters barely hanging on. The roof had partially caved in, exposing the dark interior. Vines crept over the walls, swallowing it whole. Ariana shivered. "Daniel, maybe we shouldn't—" Before she could finish, a rustling noise came from inside. I froze, listening. It could have been the wind or an animal. "We'll just take a quick look," I said, trying to sound confident. Hesitantly, we stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else, something rotten. Dust floated in the dim light streaming through broken windows. Then, from the rafters above, something moved. A sudden, violent fluttering filled the space, and before we could react, a barn owl swooped down, its pale wings cutting through the air. Ariana gasped, clutching my arm. I ducked as the owl glided past, disappearing through a hole in the roof. My heart pounded, but a nervous chuckle escaped me. "Just an owl," I said, though my hands felt clammy. The farmhouse was filled with remnants of a forgotten life. A wooden table stood in the center, covered in dust and scattered papers. Rusted pots and broken dishes littered the floor. Against the wall, an old rocking chair sat eerily still. The more I looked around, the more uneasy I felt. Then I saw the photographs. They were faded, black and white images framed in thin wooden borders, scattered across the fireplace mantel. A family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their faces were blurred with age, their eyes staring out like distant ghosts. Ariana touched my arm. "Let's go. I don't like this place." But something pulled me deeper. A wooden ladder leaned against the far wall, leading to what looked like an upper room. The wood was rotted, the rungs splintered. I hesitated, then started to climb. The smell hit me before I reached the top. Something rotting. I covered my nose, stepping into the dim attic space. The roof had partially collapsed, letting in streaks of gray light. In the corner, something dark was curled up. I moved closer, my stomach twisting. It was a dog, or what was left of one. Its body was skeletal, the fur matted and eaten away. The eyes were hollow sockets, its mouth frozen in a silent snarl. Ariana called from below. "Daniel?" Before I could answer, a sharp scream echoed through the house. Ariana's scream. I scrambled down the ladder, nearly slipping. Ariana was standing in the middle of the room, pale as a sheet. "What happened?" I asked. She pointed toward the doorway. I thought I saw something, someone." I turned, my heart racing. The doorway was empty, just the trees swaying outside. Then behind me, a whisper. "Run." The voice wasn't Ariana's, and it wasn't mine. I grabbed her hand. "We're leaving. Now." We ran. Out of the house, through the trees, back toward the villa. I didn't stop until we were inside, the door locked behind us. Ariana was shaking. I was out of breath. Neither of us spoke about what we heard, but I knew deep in my gut that something in that house knew we were there, and it didn't want us to leave. We didn't sleep much that night. Ariana lay in bed, curled on her side, her hands protectively over her stomach. I sat by the window, staring out at the hills, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us back from that farmhouse. At some point, exhaustion took over and I dozed off. When I woke up, the morning sun was streaming through the window. Ariana was already up, making coffee, in the small kitchen. She looked pale, distracted. "We need to leave," she said softly. I rubbed my face. "Ariana, it was just... I don't care what it was." She placed a hand on her stomach. "Something about that place felt wrong. I don't want to be anywhere near it." I didn't argue. I wanted to forget about the farmhouse too. But fate had other plans. Later that afternoon, while walking into town to pick up groceries, I overheard 2 locals speaking in Italian outside, a small cafe. My Italian was rusty, but I caught a few words: "La vecchia pazza," the crazy old woman. The tone in their voices made me stop. A memory surfaced. Ariana's terrified face pointing toward the farmhouse door. I thought I saw someone. I stepped closer. "Scusi," I said, my American accent thick. "Who are you talking about?" The older of the 2 men eyed me suspiciously. "Why?" I hesitated. "My wife and we were hiking yesterday. We found an old farmhouse." Their expressions darkened. The younger man muttered something under his breath. The older one, gray-haired with deep wrinkles and sharp eyes, nodded grimly. "You saw her?" he asked. I swallowed. "No, but my wife thought she did." "Who is she?" He exhaled slowly, as if debating whether to tell me. "Her name is Elena Rossi. She has lived in that house for a long time. People say she's been waiting for her son Jeff to return home." I frowned. "She's waiting for him?" The younger man scoffed. "She's been waiting for 7 years, but he's never coming back." The older man sighed, crossing himself. "Because Jeff Rossi is dead." A chill ran down my spine. "What happened to him?" "No one knows for sure." He took a slow sip of his espresso. "Some say he left for America and never came back. Others say he died in that house and that's why it's cursed." "Cursed?" He leveled his gaze at me. "People who go there don't come back the same." I felt my stomach tighten. "She still lives there?" The younger man nodded. She refuses to leave. Every evening she stands outside watching the road. She says she's waiting for Jeff to return to bring him out. Bring him out? I repeated, confused. The old man looked at me gravely. We don't ask, and neither should you. I thanked them and left. But their words stayed with me. I should have listened to Ariana. I should have left it alone. But something inside me needed answers. That evening, against my better judgment, I drove back toward the farmhouse. Ariana would have been furious if she knew, but I had to see it again to prove to myself that it was just an abandoned house and nothing more. The dirt road leading to the farmhouse felt darker this time, the trees closing in overhead. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. When the farmhouse finally came into view, my breath caught. There, standing in front of the house, was a woman, Elena Rossi. She was dressed in an old faded dress, her hair tangled, her thin arms wrapped around herself as she stared down the road. Beside her stood 3 other people. I couldn't make out their faces, but they were motionless, their bodies stiff. I parked a short distance away, hesitant to get out. But then, as if sensing me, Elena slowly turned her head toward my car. Her face was lined with age, her skin pale and stretched too tight over her bones. But it was her eyes that froze me in place, hollow and dark, like deep pits of emptiness. Then she smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent ice through my veins. I forced myself to step out of the car. My legs felt heavy. "Signora Rossi?" I called out. Her smile widened. She took a step forward, her bare feet scraping against the dirt. The 3 figures behind her remained still, their faces shadowed by the fading light. "You came back," she said softly. Her voice was dry, cracked, as if she hadn't spoken in years. I swallowed hard. I heard about your son. Jeff." Her smile didn't falter. "He will come home soon." The wind rustled through the trees. I glanced at the 3 figures behind her, unease growing in my chest. "Who are they?" Elena tilted her head slightly, as if the question confused her. Then she whispered, "They are waiting too." A shiver ran through me. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I forced myself to stay. "Elena, the locals say Jeff died 7 years ago." Her expression didn't change. She simply said, "Then why do I still hear him knocking?" My heart nearly stopped. She took another step forward, her bare feet moving too smoothly over the dirt like she was gliding. "You should come inside," she said. "You can wait with us." I took a step back. Then, from inside the farmhouse, a knock sounded. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Elena's eyes lit up with something close to joy. "He's here." The figures behind her finally moved. Their heads snapped toward the house, their bodies rigid. The knock came again. Knock, knock, knock. I turned and ran to my car. As I sped down the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Elena and the 3 figures were still standing there watching me. But the farmhouse door, the one I knew had been broken and hanging off its hinges just the day before, was now shut. And from inside, the knocking continued. I didn't tell Ariana about what happened at the farmhouse. I should have. But how could I? She was already fragile, already carrying so much pain. I convinced myself it was nothing. Just the ramblings of an old woman who had lost her mind. The knocking, the figures, the feeling that something had been watching me, I buried it. But the feeling didn't leave me. That night back at the villa, I held Ariana close as she slept. The rise and fall of her breath should have been soothing, but my mind kept drifting back to Elena Rossi, to the way she had smiled, to the 3 figures standing behind her, motionless, to the knocking. I woke up at exactly 3:07 a.m. to the sound of something scratching against the bedroom window. My pulse pounded as I sat up, staring at the dark glass. At first, I saw nothing but my own reflection. Then, a shadow moved outside. A cold chill settled into my bones. Slowly, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. There was nothing there, just the wind moving through the trees. I shook my head, trying to push away the fear. I needed sleep. Tomorrow, we are leaving this place for good. But by morning, everything changed. We were packing when my phone rang. The number was American. It was from Dr. Calloway, our obstetrician back home in Montana. I frowned as I answered. Hello? Daniel. Dr. Calloway's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I'm so sorry to call you like this, but we received some alarming results from Ariana's last scan. Ariana looked up from across the room, her brow furrowed. My grip on the phone tightened. What are you talking about? We were just at the doctor last week. You said everything looked fine. There was silence on the line. Then, Daniel, I don't know how to say this, but the baby's heartbeat is gone. The room spun. My knees almost buckled. What? My voice cracked. The scan shows that the baby... He paused as if he couldn't bring himself to say it. There's no cardiac activity. We ran it twice. I shook my head, gripping the dresser for support. That's impossible. Ariana stepped closer. Daniel, what's wrong? I couldn't answer. I couldn't even breathe. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. There has to be a mistake. Ariana's fine. The baby... She still feels... the baby moving. Another silence. Then Dr. Calloway whispered, That's not possible, Daniel. The call ended, and then a knock at the villa door. Ariana rushed past me to answer it, her face pale with worry. As she pulled the door open, my breath caught in my throat. It was Elena Rossi. She stood in the doorway, wearing the same faded dress, her tangled hair draped over her shoulders. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, standing just beyond, the porch and the overgrown grass were the three figures. They were closer now, still unmoving, still watching. Elena tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into that unsettling smile. You shouldn't have come back, she said softly. Ariana stiffened. Who is this? I stepped forward, blocking Ariana from the doorway. My voice came out hoarse. What do you want? Elena studied me for a moment before her gaze flickered to Ariana's stomach. The child, she murmured. My blood ran cold. Ariana instinctively wrapped her arms around her belly, taking a step back. Elena's smile widened. It's happening again, isn't it? I wanted to slam the door in her face, to tell her to get the hell away from us. But I couldn't move. She leaned in just enough that I could smell the stale scent of earth and decay on her skin. It's not yours to keep, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away. The three figures followed, fading into the mist like they had never been there at all. I slammed the door shut, my hands trembling. Ariana grabbed my arm. Daniel, who the hell was that? I swallowed hard. We're leaving. Now. We left Tuscany that evening. I didn't care about our luggage. I didn't care about anything except getting Ariana as far away from that place as possible. The entire flight home, I held her hand, my mind racing with the doctor's words. The baby's heartbeat was gone, but Ariana still felt her move. I didn't tell her what Elena said. When we landed in Montana, we drove straight to the hospital. Ariana was rushed into an emergency ultrasound. I sat in the waiting room, unable to breathe, my fingers clutching the arms of the chair. Then Dr. Calloway walked in, his expression grim. I stood immediately. What is it? Did you find the heartbeat? He looked at me strangely. Daniel, the scan was right. There's no heartbeat. I felt like I was drowning. But she still feels the baby moving. Dr. Calloway placed a hand on my shoulder. Daniel, what she's feeling, and it's not movement. It's just the muscles contracting. It happens sometimes when the body doesn't recognize a loss yet. I shook my head violently. No, you don't understand. She's still pregnant. He hesitated. There's something else. I stared at him, my pulse hammering. What? His voice dropped. When we ran the scan, something strange happened. The machine glitched. My skin prickled. Glitched how? He exhaled, shaking his head. There was a shadow on the scan. It almost looked like... He stopped himself. It doesn't matter. We need to induce labor. Ariana needs to deliver now. I barely remember the rest. The hospital room, the nurses, Ariana screaming in pain as the contractions started. And then... the silence. The baby was stillborn. A little girl. She wasn't breathing. She never even got the chance to. Ariana sobbed as they took her away. I felt numb, like my soul had been ripped out of my body. I left the hospital that night, unable to stay in that room. I drove without thinking, my mind spiraling. At some point, I found myself in front of Father Michael's church. I stumbled inside. The church was empty, candlelight flickering in the dimness. Father Michael sat near the altar, looking up as I approached, his face twisted with sorrow when he saw me. "You lost the baby," he said softly. I choked back a sob. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why is this happening to us?" Father Michael closed his eyes. "Because something took her." I stared at him. "What?" He slowly opened his eyes, and then he whispered, "It followed you home." I didn't go home after leaving the church. I couldn't. Instead, I drove. The rain had started falling, soft at first, then heavy, pounding against the windshield as I sped through the dark Montana roads. The streetlights blurred in the downpour, glowing like distant ghosts. Father Michael's words echoed in my mind. "It followed you home." I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. What the hell did that mean? Was he saying something? Something took my daughter? That she didn't just die, but was taken? I wanted to scream, to break something, but I just kept driving. By the time I finally pulled into my driveway, it was past midnight. The house was dark, except for the porch light, which flickered slightly as I stepped out of the car. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and heavy like the world was holding its breath. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the house. Ariana was still at the hospital, recovering from the labor, surrounded by nurses and machines that beeped like whispers in the dark. She didn't want me there. She barely spoke after they took the baby away. So I was alone. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, a strange feeling crept over me. The air was wrong. It was colder than it should have been, despite the heating. A damp, musty smell lingered in the air, something that reminded me of the farmhouse. I tried to shake the feeling off as I walked toward the kitchen. I needed a drink, something strong enough to burn the grief away, at least for a little while. Then, the sound. It came from down the hallway, a quiet, rhythmic knock, slow, deliberate. I froze. It came again. Knock, knock, knock. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was coming from the nursery. I hadn't stepped foot in there since the night we lost Noah. After he died, I locked the door and never opened it again. Ariana never asked me to. We both knew we couldn't handle it. But now, something was knocking from inside. I took a slow step forward. My breath came out in short, uneven bursts. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. Knock, knock, knock. I reached for the doorknob. My hand trembled. Then from the other side of the door, a child's voice. Soft. Familiar. "Dad, come play with me." My breath caught in my throat. I knew that voice. I knew it better than my own. It was Noah. My son. The one I buried 3 years ago. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I stumbled back, my heart hammering so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. But then the doorknob started turning, slowly, shaking. I wanted to run. Every part of me wanted to run. But I stood there, frozen, as the door creaked open. And there he was, Noah, standing in the dim glow of the hallway light, wearing the same little blue pajamas he had on the night he died. His blonde hair was tousled, his wide green eyes looking up at me with a softness that made my chest ache. He smiled. "Dad," he said. "Why didn't you come get me?" Tears burned in my eyes. My mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that this was some kind of sick nightmare. But he was there. I could smell him. The faint scent of baby powder and warmth, the way he always smelled when I kissed him goodnight. I took a shaky step forward. "Noah?" His smile widened, but something in it wasn't right. "Come play with me," he whispered. I blinked, my vision blurring with tears. That's when I saw his feet. They weren't touching the ground. Noah was floating. I stumbled back, knocking into the wall. The air in the house turned frigid, my breath coming out in short white puffs. Noah tilted his head. His smile never faltered. Then, bang! Every door in the house slammed shut at once. The lights flickered violently. The walls groaned, as if something was inside them, pushing outward. From the living room, the TV turned on by itself. The screen flickered with static, before switching to something else, something that made my blood turn to ice. A live feed of the farmhouse. The same farmhouse in Tuscany. The screen showed the front porch, where Elena Rossi stood. She was staring directly at me, through the TV. And then, Noah's voice came from behind me. Soft, innocent. "Dad, why won't you play with me?" A hand touched my shoulder. Cold, wet, wrong. I turned and saw his face change. His smile stretched too wide. His eyes turned black. And then, he screamed. A piercing, unnatural wail that shook the entire house. The walls trembled. The lights exploded. And then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the kitchen floor. The house was silent again. The nursery door was closed. Noah was gone. But I knew now, this wasn't over. Because as I lay there, my heart still hammering, I heard one last sound. A soft, rhythmic knock, coming from inside the nursery. And then, Noah's voice. "Dad, don't leave me again." I drove to the church with shaking hands. The sky was still dark, the early morning hours stretching endlessly. My house felt like a tomb, haunted by a child who wasn't supposed to be there. I could still hear Noah's voice in my head, soft, pleading. "Dad, don't leave me again." But he was gone, or at least whatever had taken his shape was gone. Father Michael was already waiting for me when I arrived at the church. He sat at the front pew, his fingers lightly touching the rosary beads in his lap. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I sat beside him, rubbing my face with my hands. He was there, Father. I saw my son. He talked to me, but it wasn't him." Father Michael nodded. "Tell me everything." I did. The knocking, the floating, the way he screamed. I even told him about the farmhouse, about Elena Rossi, about how she whispered that my child wasn't mine to keep. Father Michael listened, his expression grave. When I finished, he exhaled slowly, as if he had been expecting this. "Daniel, you know why this is happening, don't you?" I swallowed hard. "No, I don't." Father Michael turned to me, his gaze sharp. "Because you took something from her first." I frowned. "What? Who?" "Elena Rossi," he said. "Her son, Jeff." A sudden chill crawled up my spine. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. The priest's voice was steady, but heavy with meaning. "You killed her son, Daniel." A sick, twisting feeling bloomed in my stomach. "No, I didn't." Father Michael nodded solemnly. "Yes, you did. Maybe not on purpose, but it was you." And then, suddenly, I remembered. It was nearly 7 years ago. I was driving home late from a bar, the sky dark and empty, the road stretching endlessly, through the Montana countryside. I wasn't drunk, but I wasn't completely sober either. I remember the headlights cutting through the night, the music playing low on the radio, the rain starting to fall in soft, misty sheets. And then, a shadow, a figure stumbling into the road. I barely had time to react. My hands jerked the wheel too late, the sickening thud of metal against flesh. I pulled over, my heart hammering. I ran out into the rain, breathless, shaking. The man lay on the side of the road, his face pale, his eyes glassy. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and glistening in the headlights. I remember kneeling beside him, whispering, "Jesus Christ, no. No, no, no." And then, his last breath. A shuddering, broken exhale. I had killed him and I ran. I left him there. I didn't call for help, I didn't turn myself in, I just drove away. Now, sitting in the church, I felt my whole body go numb. "That was Jeff," Father Michael said softly. "Elena's son." My hands clenched into fists. But how would she know? I never told anyone. No one ever found out. Father Michael cut me off. "She knows, she's always known." He paused. "And now she's made you pay for it." My chest tightened. That's why I lost my children. It wasn't just bad luck. It was punishment. I stood abruptly, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. No, this isn't fair. It was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him." Father Michael's eyes darkened. "But you did. And you left him there to die alone." The weight of my sins pressed down on me like a stone. This is why Noah died. This is why my daughter never lived. Elena Rossi had taken them because I took her son first. I stumbled toward the altar, gripping the wooden edges like they were the only things keeping me upright. "What do I do?" I whispered. "How do I stop this?" Father Michael exhaled, standing slowly. "You have to face it, go back to her, make it right." The thought sent a bolt of cold fear through me. Go back? To that farmhouse? To her? To whatever the hell was waiting for me there? But I had no choice. I drove through the winding roads as the sun set, the sky bleeding into dark shades of orange and purple. The farmhouse loomed ahead, untouched by time. The vines still crawled. Over the stone walls, the windows still gaping like hollow eyes. Elena was waiting for me. She stood on the porch, her frail body wrapped in a tattered shawl. Her expression was unreadable, but this time she wasn't smiling. The three figures were still there, standing just behind her in the shadows. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady. "Elena," I called out. She tilted her head. "You came back." I swallowed hard. I know what I did. A flicker of something passed through her hollow eyes. "Do you?" I took another step forward. "I killed Jeff," I said, my voice shaking. "It was an accident, but I left him there. I ran." She watched me in silence. I took a breath. "I'm sorry." The wind howled through the trees. Then, the knocking. From inside the house. Knock, knock, knock. Elena's expression didn't change. "He's been waiting." My stomach clenched. "For what?" Her eyes darkened. "To bring you inside." The knocking grew louder, more urgent. The door, the broken, rotting door, slowly swung open on its own. A blast of frigid air rushed out. And then, from the darkness inside, a voice. "Dad, come play with me." It was Noah. I stepped back, my breath catching. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not him." The voice came again, closer this time. "Dad, why did you leave me?" Tears burned in my eyes. I didn't. I never wanted to. The darkness inside the house moved, a shifting, writhing shape lurking just beyond the threshold. Then, a scream, a twisted, unnatural howl that shook the ground beneath me. The figures behind Elena snapped their heads toward me, their mouths opening wide in silent wails. The air turned thick, suffocating. And suddenly, I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I didn't end this now, it wouldn't stop. Not with me, not with Ariana. It would take everything. I did the only thing I could. I stepped forward, into the house, and the darkness swallowed me whole. The moment I stepped inside the farmhouse, the air changed. It was thick, oppressive, almost alive. The stench of damp wood and rotting earth hit me like a wall. The door behind me slammed shut on its own, cutting off the last sliver of dying sunlight. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The house groaned around me like it was breathing. The wooden beams above creaked, the floorboards beneath my feet felt softer than they should, as if something beneath them was shifting. Then, the whispers. Soft, slithering through the air like tendrils of smoke. You left him. You killed him. You deserve this. My pulse pounded in my ears, and then footsteps. Light, playful, childlike. I turned toward the hallway, just as a small figure darted past. Noah, or what looked like him. His little blue pajamas were torn and dirty, his blonde hair matted, his bare feet left behind wet, muddy footprints on the wooden floor. He stopped at the end of the hallway, just at the edge of the shadows. His back was to me, his head slightly tilted like he was listening. A shiver ran through me. Noah. My voice was barely above a whisper. Slowly, he turned, and I felt my stomach drop. His face was wrong. His mouth was too wide, his teeth too sharp. His eyes, empty, black pits that reflected no light. He smiled. Dad, he said, you finally came to play. The floor beneath me lurched. I staggered, barely catching myself against the wall. The shadows along the hallway stretched, crawling toward me like living things. Then, the house began to shake. The walls trembled. The wooden beams above cracked and groaned. The pictures on the walls, pictures of people who shouldn't have been there, began to move. Their eyes followed me. Their mouths opened. Whispers turned into screams. I had to get out. I stumbled backward, but the hallway behind me was gone. The door I had come through, gone. Only darkness remained. I turned back to Noah. He took a step toward me, his bare feet making no sound. His shadow stretched unnaturally, long behind him. You left me, he whispered. I shook my head. No, Noah. I never wanted to leave you. His small hand lifted, and every door in the house flew open at once. From the rooms they came, pale figures, gaunt, twisted, their faces stretched in silent wails, their fingers long and claw-like. They crawled toward me. Some dragged themselves. On broken limbs, their eyes hollow, empty. I pressed against the wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Then, in the doorway behind Noah, she appeared. Elena Rossi. She stood in the shadows, her bony hands resting on his shoulders. Her lips curled into that same unnerving smile. This is what you owe, she whispered. I shook my head violently. No, I didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. Her eyes flashed. And did my Jeff mean to die? Did he choose to be left alone on the road like an animal? The house shook again. The walls groaned, splitting apart. Noah, I pleaded. Please, you're my son. You know I love you. His small broken face twisted into something almost sad. For a moment I thought I saw the real him again. But then Elena's grip on his shoulders tightened. She's taking him from you, a voice whispered in my ear. I turned. Father Michael, or something wearing his face. He stood beside me, his robe soaked with something dark and thick. His eyes were cloudy like he was half dead. You let her take Jeff, the voice whispered. Will you let her take Noah too? I turned back to Noah. He was slipping further into the darkness, his small hand clasped tightly in Elena's. She was taking him. I didn't think. I lunged. I grabbed Noah's wrist, cold, too cold, and pulled. Elena's face twisted into a snarl. The house screamed, the walls buckled. The floor collapsed beneath us, and then I woke up in the church. Father Michael stood over me, pressing a cross against my forehead. The air was still. The church was silent. I gasped, sitting up, my body drenched in sweat. Noah. Where's Noah? Father Michael's expression was grave. He's gone. Tears filled my eyes. No, You pulled him away from her, he said softly. But he was never really here, Daniel. I swallowed hard. My entire body shook. I had saved my son, or at least what was left of him. I never saw Elena Rossi again. The farmhouse was found burned to the ground 3 days later. No one knew how it happened. The authorities found no bodies inside. Ariana and I moved away from Montana. She never asked what happened that night, and I never told her. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is too quiet, I hear it. A soft, rhythmic knock, 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 and a child's voice. Dad, don't forget me. And I never will. I never expected to return to that place. After everything that happened, the farmhouse, the spirits, Noah, I thought I had left it all behind. But fate has a way of keeping us tethered to our sins, reminding us that no matter how far we run, the past will always find us. It had been 3 years since that night. 3 years since I had pulled Noah, or whatever was left of him, away from the darkness. 3 years since the farmhouse had burned to the ground, leaving nothing behind but ashes and memories. Ariana and I moved to a quiet town in Colorado. She never asked me what really happened that night, and I never told her. Some things were better left buried. With time, we healed, or at least we tried to. And then, something unexpected happened. Ariana got pregnant again. I should have been overjoyed, but fear clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't shake the feeling that this child, this second chance, would be taken from me too. I spent months praying, hoping, begging God to let me keep this one. And maybe, just maybe, he heard me. Because on a cold winter morning, beneath the soft light of a hospital room, our daughter Isabel was born. She was perfect, tiny, pink, alive. The moment I held her in my arms, I felt something shift inside me, like the weight I had been carrying for so long had finally begun to lift. But there was still one thing left unfinished, one thing I had to do. Elena Rossi was still alive. Somehow she had survived the fire. The authorities found her wandering near the wreckage of the farmhouse, barefoot and muttering to herself. She had nowhere to go, no family, no friends. The town didn't want her. So, with the help of Father Michael, I took her in. People thought I was crazy. They asked me why. Why take care of the woman who cursed me? Who stole my children? I had no answer except this. Because I took her son first. I owed her that much. I found a small house for her, not far from the church. Father Michael visited often, bringing her food, sitting with her for hours as she whispered to herself. Most days she was calm, quiet, but sometimes she would forget. She would look at me, her face lighting up with recognition. Jeff, she would whisper, reaching for my hand. You finally came home. And I let her believe it. Because maybe that was my penance, to be the son she had lost, just as I had lost my own. But some nights the past crept back. I would find her standing by the window, staring at the road, waiting for a boy who would never come home. I never told her the truth, that her son had died alone on a rainy road, that I had left him there. Instead, I would gently take her hand and say, "Come to bed, Mom." And she would smile, nodding. But deep down I knew. She always remembered. Years passed. Elena grew older, frailer. The fire that once burned behind her eyes faded. One evening, as I sat with her in her small living room, she looked at me, not as Jeff, not as a stranger, but as a man who had made a terrible mistake. She reached for my hand, her grip weaker than ever. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered. Tears burned in my eyes. It was. She shook her head slowly. He was already lost, long before that night. She never spoke of it again. Not long after, she passed away in her sleep. Father Michael and I buried her next to Jeff in a small cemetery at the edge of town. No one else came to the funeral. It was just us, the living burying the dead. Now, as I sit on my front porch watching Isabel run across the yard laughing, I finally understand. The past never truly leaves us. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the dark corners of our minds, in the whispers of the night. But we have a choice to let it consume us, or to live in spite of it. Ariana steps outside, her smile warm. She watches Isabel with soft eyes, then looks at me. "You okay?" I nod. "Yeah, I think I am." For the first time in years, I believe it. And in the distance somewhere, beyond the veil of the living and the dead, I swear I hear it. A soft rhythmic knock. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, I don't answer. When I was a kid, every elementary school had its own ghost stories. Some kids whispered about a haunted bathroom stall. Others swore there was a monster in the boiler room. At East Pine Elementary, we had Muppet Man. The story went like this. A long time ago, there was a man who went in for plastic surgery, but something went horribly wrong. His face was left twisted, his skin stretched too tight, his mouth frozen in a permanent grin. People said he stole a mascot costume from a traveling carnival, a patchwork suit made from different animal characters. He disappeared into the woods, behind the school, and was never seen again, except by the kids who dared to get too close to the old oak tree at the edge of the playground. The oak tree was massive, with thick, knotted roots that stretched out like fingers clawing through the dirt. It stood alone, far enough from the school that teachers didn't bother checking on kids who played there. If you stood too close, you'd hear rustling from inside, like something was moving inside the tree. And if you weren't careful, Muppet Man would get you. The last kid who saw him was Jason Hughes. Jason was my neighbor. We weren't best friends or anything, but we walked to school together every morning. He was a quiet kid, always anxious, always fidgeting with his sleeves. Then, one winter morning in 3rd grade, Jason Hughes disappeared. His parents called the police. Search parties went out. Flyers with his picture covered every telephone pole in town. The only thing they found? His clothes balled up in a pile at the base of the oak tree. They were filthy, like they had been dragged through the mud. But there was no sign of Jason. After that, kids at school started calling me Jason. "You're next, Jason," they'd whisper in the hallways. "Muppet Man's gonna get you too." I laughed it off, but deep down I never went near that tree. Not until years later. Not until I saw him. I was in 5th grade when I made the mistake of getting too close. It was February and the wind cut through my jacket as I sat beneath the oak tree reading. The other kids were playing kickball, and I wanted to be left alone. For a while, it worked, but then I lost track of time. The bell rang, signaling the end of recess. I jumped up, shoving my book into my backpack. I was late. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the tree line. It wasn't moving, just watching me. The first thing I noticed was the costume. It looked like a cheap knockoff of an old Muppet, like something you'd see in a forgotten Chuck E. Cheese. The head was oversized, the fabric stretched and discolored. One ear flopped to the side, barely hanging on. But it wasn't just the costume, it was the way it stood, unnatural, wrong. I felt my stomach drop. I knew that costume. I had seen it before, in a picture, in Jason Hughes's house. And then, it moved. Not like a person walking, but jerking, like a puppet with its strings being yanked. It turned, then ran straight into the hollow of the tree. I don't remember running to class. I don't remember much of anything after that except the overwhelming sense of dread settling deep into my bones. Because I knew what I had just seen. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the costume, the way it twitched, the way it ran into the tree like it belonged there. At some point I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my bed anymore. I was outside, standing in front of the oak tree. The wind howled through the branches. My breath came out in short white puffs. I should have run. I tried to run. But then I saw him. Jason. He was standing next to the tree, his clothes just as dirty as the day they found them. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "You saw him," he whispered. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. Jason swallowed hard. He took my face. A shiver ran down my spine. "What?" I choked out. Jason looked up at the tree. Muppet Man. He needed my face to be scary. I followed his gaze, and for the first time I saw what was really inside the tree. A pile of faces. Some were cracked, dried out like old leather. Others were fresh, their skin stretched into permanent screams. And at the top of the pile, Jason's face. I turned back to Jason, my whole body trembling. Who is he?" Jason's ghost didn't blink, didn't breathe. "You already know." And that's when I heard it. A voice, familiar, deep. "What are you doing out here, kid?" I spun around. Standing behind me, holding a flashlight, was Jason's dad, Mr. Hughes. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but it was his voice that made my blood run cold. Because it was the same voice I had heard that afternoon, the same voice that came from the thing in the costume. The truth hit me like ice water. Muppet Man was Jason's dad. He had taken Jason's face. He had worn it just like all the others to keep kids away from the tree, to scare them, to make sure no one ever found out. And now, he was looking right at me. I ran. I don't know how I made it home, but I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop until I was inside, the door locked behind me. My chest heaved, my skin slick with sweat. For weeks I didn't sleep. I didn't speak. I never told anyone what I saw, because I knew no one would believe me. Because Jason was already dead. And his father? He was still out there, still wearing faces. I never saw Muppet Man again. But sometimes when I walk past the old oak tree, I feel it. A chill in the air, a whisper in the wind, and I know he's still watching. I don't know why we thought it was a good idea. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe we were just bored. Either way, when Jake suggested we check out the old Montgomery house on the edge of town, I didn't say no. Everyone in Millersville had heard the stories. The house had been abandoned for decades, sitting on an overgrown lot off Maplewood Drive. Some people said it was haunted. Others said it was just dangerous. Rotting floors, broken stairs, all the usual warnings. But Jake, he never listened to warnings. We got there just after midnight. The place was worse than I expected. Windows boarded up, roof sagging, front door half off its hinges. The air smelled damp, like old wood and decay. We stepped inside, our flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. "Probably a waste of time," I muttered, but Jake grinned. "Come on, man, just a quick look." We moved through the house, our footsteps echoing on the warped floorboards. Everything was trashed, furniture broken, graffiti covering the walls. But the worst part was the silence. It was so complete, it felt unnatural, like the house was holding its breath. Then we found the hole. It was in the basement near the back wall. A perfect round hole in the concrete floor about 3 feet across. No rubble, no signs of digging. Just a hole, like the ground had been scooped out. Jake, of course, had to get closer. "Dude, don't," I warned. But he was already at the edge, peering in. Then he screamed. I barely saw what happened. 1 second. He was there, the next he was gone. I ran to the edge, shining my flashlight down, but there was nothing, no body, no bottom, just darkness. I called his name, no response. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone to call for help, but before I could dial, my flashlight flickered and died. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint, from the hole. "Hey man, help me out." It was Jake, but something was wrong with his voice. I ran. I don't even remember getting out of the house, just the feeling of my heart slamming against my ribs as I sprinted through the night. When I finally reached my truck, I locked the doors and sat there, trying to breathe. Jake was dead. I knew that, so how did I hear him? I barely slept that night, and when morning came, I felt like I was still trapped in a nightmare. But then my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Hey man, wanna grab breakfast?" I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Maybe it was a sick joke. Maybe someone had found his phone, but when I called, he answered, and it was his voice. "Yo, dude, where'd you go last night?" He laughed. "You took off without me." I couldn't speak. It wasn't possible. An hour later, I met him at the diner on Main Street, and there he was, sitting in our usual booth, sipping coffee like nothing had happened, like he hadn't died. "You okay?" he asked, frowning. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that I had watched him fall into that impossible hole, that I had heard his voice in the dark, but I just sat there staring at him. He looked normal. No injuries. No memories of what happened. I forced myself to go through breakfast, nodding and pretending like everything was fine. But it wasn't, because Jake shouldn't be here, and I needed to find out why. I went back to the Montgomery house that night. I didn't tell Jake. I didn't even know if he was really Jake, but I had to see for myself. When I got there, something was different. The house looked intact. The broken windows? Fixed. The sagging roof? Good as new. Even the front door, which had been hanging off its hinges the night before, was solid and closed. My stomach turned. Inside, the air was thick, too still. I moved carefully, my flashlight sweeping over the walls. Everything looked untouched. And then I reached the basement. The hole was gone. The concrete floor was smooth, like it had never been broken. I stepped closer, my hands shaking. Was I losing my mind? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flicker of black, like something moving just beyond the edge of my vision. I spun around. Nothing. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it watching me. I started researching that night, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. And that's when I found it. A conspiracy forum. A thread about plot holes in reality. People claiming that sometimes things just reset. A man who lost his wife in a car accident, only to wake up the next morning and find her alive, with no memory of the crash. A woman whose best friend vanished for weeks, then returned as if nothing had happened, wearing a different outfit than when she disappeared. Minor details, tiny inconsistencies, like a book where the writer changed something but didn't fix the rest. And buried in the comments, I found a name. Dennis. He had been investigating this for years, and he had seen them too, the shadowy figures at the edges of reality. Dennis and I talked online for a week before I finally told him about Jake, and he believed me, because it had happened to his friend too. They fix mistakes, he said. When reality breaks, they patch it, and sometimes people come back wrong. That night we video called. He looked exhausted, eyes darting around like he was being watched. "They know we're talking," he whispered. Then his screen glitched, and behind him something moved, tall, black, featureless. I tried to warn him, but it was too late. His screen froze, his eyes went wide, and then the call ended. Dennis was gone, and outside my window I saw them, the creatures, standing, watching. I wasn't supposed to know. I wasn't supposed to see. And now, they were coming for me. Then I felt it. A pulling sensation, like I was fading. My skin tingled, my body went numb. I was being erased. And now I'm nowhere. Avoid a missing scene, so if you're reading this, ask yourself one thing. How can I be writing this if I don't exist? The first time I saw the cabin, I was 13 years old. My older brother Michael had just bought it, a fixer-upper deep in the woods of Washington, tucked away on the edge of Lake Wenatchee. It was small, but it had charm. An old stone fireplace, a deck that overlooked the water and the kind of silence you only find in the wilderness. He had spent years working on it, making it his escape from the noise of Seattle. Now it was my escape too. I had nowhere else to go. The divorce had drained me, mentally, emotionally, financially. 14 years of marriage gone like it was never real. I hadn't fought for the house, hadn't fought for much of anything, really. I just packed my things, signed the papers, and left. Michael had offered me the cabin for as long as I needed. "No one's been up there in months," he said over the phone. "It's stocked with supplies. You'll have the place to yourself." That was the whole point. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to hear her name. I just wanted silence. The first few days were exactly what I needed. Mornings spent on the deck, drinking coffee as mist rolled off the lake. Afternoons hiking trails I hadn't walked in years. At night, the fire crackled and the sound of the wind through the trees lulled me to sleep. For the first time in a long time, I felt okay. Then the storm rolled in, and everything changed. It started with the rain. Not just any rain, the kind that never stops. A wall of water hammering against the roof, drowning out every other sound. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the cabin. At first, I welcomed it. The isolation felt even more complete. But by the third night, the storm wasn't just outside anymore. I was lying in bed when I heard it, a soft thud on the roof. I froze, listening. Probably just a branch, I told myself, or an animal. But then, another thud, and another, like footsteps. I sat up, heart pounding. The storm raged outside, but between the cracks of thunder, I heard it, shuffling movement right above me. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped toward the window. The rain blurred the glass, but for a moment I thought I saw something. Not a person, not exactly. A shape, outlined in the rain, like the water was revealing something invisible. A figure, tall, unmoving, staring in. Then it was gone. I slammed the curtains shut, breathing hard. It's just the storm, I told myself. Just my imagination. But I didn't sleep that night. And by morning, the rain was still falling. The next night I heard it again. Footsteps, not on the roof this time, on the porch. I held my breath, listening as something moved just outside the front door. The handle rattled. Then, bang! The door slammed open, wind and rain rushing in. I scrambled back, gripping the flashlight, my heart hammering. And then I saw it. A figure stood just inside the doorway, dripping wet. Tall. Too tall. The edges of its form blurred like it wasn't fully there. And then, it spoke. "Look at me." The voice was wet, gurgling, like someone trying to speak underwater. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It took a step forward. The floor creaked. "Look at me." I did the only thing I could. I ran. I dove into the bathroom, locking the door behind me, pressing my back against it. My chest heaved, my skin cold with sweat. Outside, the house was silent, but I knew it was still there, waiting. I don't know how long I stayed in that bathroom. Hours, maybe longer. When I finally emerged, the house was empty. The door was shut. No puddles on the floor, no sign that anything had ever been there. But I knew better. And the storm hadn't stopped. Days passed, but the sky never changed. The rain never let up. The sun never rose. I checked my phone, 3:30 a.m. Then an hour later, 3:30 a.m. The day wasn't moving, like time itself was stuck. And then, the whispers started. At night, from the walls, from the roof. And always, always, footsteps. I stopped turning on the lights, stopped looking out the windows, because every time I did, I saw them. Figures, just beyond the glass, outlined in the rain, standing, watching. One night as I lay awake in bed, something ran across the roof, fast, inhuman, and then the voice. Look at me. Closer now. And then another voice, whispering, not outside, inside, right next to my ear. Things should have been different. My blood froze, because this time it was my own voice. I should have left. I should have grabbed my keys, run into the storm, driven until I saw civilization, but I didn't. Something kept me there. Something made me stay. Maybe it was the way the storm wouldn't let up. Maybe it was the way the days never changed. Maybe it was because deep down I knew this wasn't just about the cabin. This was about me. On the last night, I finally gave in. I walked to the mirror in the bedroom. The reflection was wrong. Not just distorted. Wrong. It wasn't my face staring back at me. It was him. The figure from the doorway. The thing from the roof. My own face, but not mine. Pale, hollow, stretched too thin. His lips moved, but I didn't hear anything. Until I did. Look at me. And I did. The storm stopped. The rain vanished. I was alone in the cabin. Had always been alone. Or maybe I never really left, and neither did he. I never forgot the way Ethan Carter looked at me. It wasn't grief. It wasn't rage. It was something worse. Judgment. As a surgeon, I was used to seeing families react to loss. Some cried, some collapsed, some just sat there, numb. But Ethan, he just stared at me like he already knew the truth before I even said it. His father, William Carter, had been a high-risk case. Late-stage heart failure, multiple complications. The surgery had been a last-ditch effort, his only chance. And, even then, the odds had been slim. I told them that. I told his family. Ethan had nodded, his jaw clenched tight. His mother, Linda, had barely moved. She just sat in the waiting room, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on the floor. And then William Carter died. When I walked into the waiting room to break the news, I felt the weight of it in my chest. I had lost patients before, but something about this one felt different. Ethan said nothing. His mother didn't even look up. And yet, as I turned to leave, I felt Ethan's eyes on me, like he knew something I didn't. That night, I stayed late at Newport General Hospital, alone in my office, a half-empty bottle of whiskey sitting on my desk. I wasn't supposed to drink at work. I wasn't supposed to drink at all. But some nights, the weight of it all, the stress, the failures, felt like too much. I poured another glass, but it didn't do anything to stop the image of Ethan's cold, knowing stare from burning into my mind. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of something I would never be able to escape. The next time I saw Ethan Carter, I was sitting in Frankie's Diner, a quiet spot on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where the coffee was always too bitter, but the waitresses remembered your name. Ethan slid into the booth across from me without asking. "You shouldn't drink before surgery," he said. I looked up slowly, my hands tightening around my coffee cup. "I don't," I said. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "That's funny, because I saw the bottle in your office." A slow, creeping feeling spread through my chest. I never told him about the whiskey. "What do you want, Ethan?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Dinner. My mother wants to thank you." Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn. I thought of Linda Carter in that waiting room, motionless, silent. I hadn't seen her cry, hadn't heard her speak. And now she wanted to have dinner? "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. Ethan's expression darkened. "It's not an invitation." He stood, adjusting his coat. "You do that, Dr. Harris." As he walked out of the diner, I realized something. I had locked my office door that night. Carolyn wasn't happy when I told her about the dinner. "You're going?" she asked, arms crossed in the kitchen. I sighed. "It's just one night." "You don't owe them anything, Daniel." She was right. But something about Ethan, about the way he expected me to be there, made it feel like I didn't have a choice. So that Friday, I found myself sitting at the Carter's dining table, a plate of roast beef and mashed potatoes in front of me. Linda Carter moved mechanically, her motions too precise, too rehearsed. Ethan sat at the head of the table watching. "You have a family, don't you?" he asked suddenly. I nodded slowly. "A wife. 2 kids, James and Emily." Ethan smiled. "That's nice. It's important to have balance." The way he said it sent a shiver through me. I tried to eat, but my stomach was in knots. And by the time I left, I knew something was wrong. It started with James. One morning, he couldn't move his legs. We rushed him to the hospital. Tests, scans, specialists, nothing. No reason for the sudden paralysis. Days later, Emily collapsed in the kitchen. She couldn't move either. 2 children, both suddenly unable to walk. No explanation. That night, Ethan Carter came to my house. Carolyn opened the door. I heard her gasp. I rushed to the front hallway. And there he was, standing in my home, like he belonged there. "It's about balance," he said softly. I felt Carolyn stiffen beside me. Ethan tilted his head. "A life was taken, Dr. Harris, and now the scales have shifted." I shook my head, my hands trembling. "You're insane." Ethan's smile didn't fade. "Give one life, or watch them all suffer." Carolyn begged him to stop, but Ethan wasn't listening, because it wasn't a request. It was a command. I did, the only thing I could. I took my family to the basement. I tied them down. I stood over my son, gun in hand, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Carolyn sobbed. Emily whimpered. James just stared at me. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. Balance must be restored. I pulled the trigger. The moment James's body went still, Emily gasped. She could move again. Carolyn collapsed, screaming. And Ethan Carter? He was gone. We moved out of the house, out of Newport. Carolyn never forgave me. Emily never spoke about what happened. But one day, years later, I saw him again. Ethan, sitting in Frankie's diner. He smiled at me. And Carolyn and Emily? They got up and walked away, like they had been waiting for him. And I knew I had never really saved them. My name is Marco Sanders. I work the night shift as a security guard at an old rundown industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. It's the kind of place that used to be important but has long since been forgotten. Most of the units inside are abandoned, used only for storage. My job is simple: monitor the security cameras, do perimeter checks, and make sure no one sneaks in. The nights were long and quiet, giving me plenty of time to think, though sometimes I wished I didn't have so much time alone with my thoughts. A year ago, I got involved with my neighbor, Anna. She was beautiful, confident, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only man in the world. For a while, I thought I was. We kept our relationship secret. Her idea, not mine. She said she didn't want people in the neighborhood talking. Then, a month ago, I saw her downtown, walking hand in hand with some guy in a suit. They laughed, kissed at a streetlight. My stomach twisted as I watched. She had been playing me the whole time. I confronted her that night, but she barely seemed to care. "Marco, what did you think this was?" she said, smirking. "I never promised you anything." I wanted to yell, to break something, but I didn't. I just walked away. Since then, something inside me changed. I stopped trusting people. I threw myself into work, taking as many shifts as I could. Anything to avoid being home. But the night after I saw her with him, That was the first time something strange happened at the warehouse. It started with a sound. I was sitting in the security office watching the cameras when I heard it. Footsteps. I checked the monitors. Nothing. The warehouse was massive, with long, empty corridors and rows of metal, shelving filled with forgotten supplies. The concrete floors made any noise echo, so I thought maybe it was just the wind or an animal. Then at 2:07 a.m., I saw something on the monitor. A dark shape, moving at the far end of one of the hallways. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out to check. The air in the warehouse felt heavier than usual. The hairs on my arms stood up as I moved down the corridor, my boots echoing against the concrete. I turned the corner and nothing. The hallway was empty. I told myself it was just a glitch in the camera, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next few nights, the activity increased. The footsteps returned, louder. Sometimes, I'd hear a scraping sound like metal dragging across the floor. Other times, it was a faint tapping on the walls like someone knocking from the inside. The cameras kept flickering, but they never showed anything clear. Just movement in the shadows. I told my coworkers about it, but they laughed it off. "Man, this place is old as hell. Probably just settling noises," one of them said. Another guy, Tom, smirked. "Or maybe it's a ghost. You know, some dude probably died in here back in the day." I wasn't laughing. One night while doing my rounds, I heard something that sent chills through me. A whisper. It was so faint I almost thought I imagined it, but I didn't. Something was here, and it knew I was listening. I started carrying my flashlight everywhere. I wasn't scared of people. I was a big guy trained in self-defense, but this was different. One night I was watching the cameras when the screen flickered. At the entrance to hallway 6, I saw it. A figure, tall, thin, standing in the dark. I jumped up, grabbing my flashlight. I ran to the hallway, heart pounding. When I turned the corner, the figure was gone, but the air was different, heavy, like someone was still there, watching me. Then, bang, a metal pipe crashed to the floor behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing. I checked the camera footage later. The figure was there, but just for a second. Then, it vanished. I started dreading work, but what happened next was worse. One night after a late shift, I came home to find my front door slightly open. I stepped inside, every nerve on edge. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw it. Muddy footprints leading into my living room. I grabbed my baseball bat and searched the house, convinced Anna's boyfriend had come to mess with me. But I found nothing. Then the lights flickered. The air turned cold. And in the corner of my bedroom, I saw a shadow move. I didn't sleep that night. I almost called in sick the next night, but something told me I needed to go in. I needed answers. At 2:15 a.m., the camera at the main entrance flickered. I saw it again. The figure. I grabbed my flashlight and ran straight there. As soon as I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. My breath came out in white puffs. Then, tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from behind me. I turned, the flashlight beam shaking. Nothing. Then, boom. The storage room door slammed shut. I ran. I tried telling my boss, but he waved it off. "Just do your job, Marco." But I knew the truth. Something was in that warehouse. Something had followed me home. And now, it was waiting. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. A whisper, right by my ear. It said my name. I never liked the corridor on the third floor of my office building. Something about it always felt wrong. It was narrow, dimly lit, and led to a rarely used storage room. The walls were lined with faded bulletin boards and outdated safety posters, but what bothered me most was the feeling. Every time I walked down that hallway, I felt watched, like something unseen was lurking just beyond my vision. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the dim lights and the silence. But the more I avoided it, the stronger the feeling became. It wasn't just paranoia, it was like something in that corridor was aware of me. One evening, I was the last one in the office, finishing up reports. I had to pass through the corridor to grab a file from the storage room. As soon as I stepped in, a gust of cold air rushed past me, making the hair on my arms stand up. A second later, bang. I froze. The storage room door had slammed shut. Heart pounding, I rushed forward and yanked the handle, but it was locked. I tried the knob again, but it wouldn't budge. I was sure it had been opened just moments before. I turned to leave, but then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, deliberate knocking from inside the locked room. I backed away slowly, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. By the time I reached my desk, I had convinced myself it was just a draft, just the building settling. But deep down, I knew better. Something was in that corridor. A few days later, I was still shaken from the storage room incident. I avoided the corridor as much as possible, taking longer routes to avoid, walking past it. I told a few coworkers about the slamming doors, but they just laughed it off. Must be the old HVAC system, one of them said. This building's ancient. I wanted to believe that. That morning, the office was unusually quiet. I was sipping my second cup of coffee when the front desk called me. "Martin, there's a postman here for you. Says it's urgent." I frowned. I wasn't expecting any deliveries. I walked to the lobby where a tall, thin postman stood, holding a letter in a weathered envelope. His uniform was slightly wrinkled and his expression was blank. "This was sent to you," he said in a monotone voice, handing it over. I looked at the return address. It was from my hometown. I hadn't been back in years. With growing dread, I tore open the envelope and read the first few lines. "We regret to inform you of the passing of your uncle, Thomas Barrett." I gripped the paper tighter. Uncle Thomas had practically raised me after my parents passed. I hadn't spoken to him in years, and now he was gone. The postman cleared his throat. "You should go." I looked up at him. His expression hadn't changed, but something about the way he said it sent a chill through me. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, I should." But as I turned to leave, I could swear I heard him whisper something under his breath. It almost sounded like, "Don't take the corridor." I returned from my uncle's funeral 2 days later. It had been a quiet, somber event. Only a handful of distant relatives and a priest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. The morning after I got back, I was making coffee when I noticed something strange. Outside, standing near the edge of my yard, was a man. He wasn't just standing. He was staring at my house. It was my neighbor's gardener, an old man named Henry who had been cutting lawns in the neighborhood for as long as I could remember. He usually worked quietly, but today something was different. He had a twisted smile on his face. Not a friendly smile. Not even a fake one. It was something else, something wrong. I opened the window. "Henry, you okay?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring. I stepped onto the porch. "Henry?" The moment I said his name, he turned and ran. Not a casual jog, not even a panicked sprint. He ran like something had startled him, like he had been caught doing something he shouldn't. I stood frozen, watching him disappear down the street. When I turned back to my house, my stomach dropped. The curtains in my upstairs window, they were moving, but I lived alone. That night at work, I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to Henry. What the hell had he been looking at? Why did he run? I avoided the corridor as much as I could, but eventually I had to pass by it. As soon as I stepped in, I felt the air grow heavy. I wasn't alone. I walked faster, but halfway down, the lights flickered. Tap, tap, tap. I spun around. The sound was coming from inside the storage room. I pulled out my phone, shaking, and hit record. Silence. I stopped recording. Scrape. A long, slow scraping noise. Metal against metal. I hit record again. Nothing. I turned and sprinted down the hall, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't look back. I started leaving work earlier, refusing to be the last one in the building. But one evening I had no choice. I was stuck finishing reports. As I packed up, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Not slow. Running. I turned, expecting to see a coworker. The corridor was empty. Then, slam. The storage room door shut violently. The lights flickered again. And then I saw it. A shadow, not cast by a person, but moving on its own. I ran. The next morning, Henry was back. He wasn't cutting grass. He was just standing there watching again. I walked up to him. My nerves shot. "Why do you keep looking at my house?" His smile widened. "You should leave." I shuddered. "Why?" Henry took a deep breath and whispered, "Because something followed you home." I quit my job 2 weeks later. I never used the corridor again. But at night, in my house, I still hear it tap, 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 and I know deep down, the corridor never really let me go. Moving to 1245 Sycamore Lane felt like a fresh start. My wife, Rachel, and I had been looking for a quiet place to settle down with her 2 kids, Emily and Jake, after everything we'd been through. 5 years ago, my first wife, Lisa, passed away in a car accident, and for a long time, I felt like a ghost of myself. Rachel was patient, understanding, but things weren't always easy. Her kids saw me as some guy trying to replace their dad, and I didn't blame them. The house was an old colonial-style home in a peaceful neighborhood in upstate New York, the kind of place where people waved but didn't pry. It needed some work. Loose floorboards, a drafty attic, a garage that barely fit my truck. But it felt like a place we could make our own. On the day we moved in, something strange happened. My truck broke down about a mile from the house. I was stranded on the roadside for hours, waiting for a tow. While I waited, I noticed a small funeral procession heading into a cemetery near a church down the road. Only 2 or 3 people stood by the grave. It felt off. A few days later, I heard that our next-door neighbor, old Mr. Donner, had passed away. No one really talked about him. No one went to his funeral. At the time, I shrugged it off. People die. Life moves on. But looking back, I wonder if that was the first sign that something in Sycamore Lane wasn't quite right. The first time it happened, I was in bed, half asleep. The doorbell rang, short, sharp. I checked my phone, 11:13 p.m. Rachel stirred beside me. "Who the hell is that?" she mumbled. "Probably some kid messing around," I muttered, getting up. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and made my way downstairs. When I reached the door, I hesitated. Through the peephole, nothing. Porch light on, empty steps. I opened the door. The night air was cold, silent. No cars, no footsteps, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. I went back inside, chalking it up to a prank. But it happened again, 2:07 a.m., then again at 4:22 a.m. Every time I rushed to the door, every time, no one was there. The next morning at breakfast, I mentioned it to Rachel. "Probably a wiring issue," she said, distracted as she scrolled through her phone. Emily, 16 and permanently unimpressed, didn't even look up from her cereal. "Maybe it's the ghost of that old guy next door." Jake, only 10, seemed genuinely uneasy. "Can't we just turn it off?" I shook my head. "I'll check it out later." That day I replaced the doorbell button. Simple fix. Or so I thought. That night it rang again. Annoyed, I installed a motion-activated camera by the front door. That way I'd finally catch whoever was messing with us. The first night I woke to the sound of the doorbell, 1:51 a.m. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Nothing. The next morning I scrolled through the footage. There was something, just a vague blur near the edge of the porch. Not a person. Not an animal, just a shadow. Feeling uneasy, I stepped outside to take a look around. That's when I noticed it. The grass near the hedges was flattened as if someone had been standing there for a long time. Near the driveway, faint footprints led toward the street. That afternoon, I went to the garage a few blocks away, the same one I visited when my truck broke down. The owner, Mike, was a no-nonsense kind of guy. "Hey, have you ever heard about the guy who lived next door to me, Mr. Donner?" Mike wiped his hands on a rag. Yeah. Old man lived alone. Kinda weird. Never talked much. No family showed. Up when he died. Did he ever have visitors? I asked. Mike gave me a look. Not that I ever saw. I left feeling more uneasy than before. The doorbell kept ringing. Always at odd hours. 12:47 a.m., 3:11 a.m., 4:58 a.m. I was exhausted. Rachel was irritated. This is ridiculous, Martin. Just call the police. And tell them what? That my doorbell has a ghost? One night, after another late-night ring, I ran outside shouting into the dark, "Whoever you are, this isn't funny." In the silence that followed, I heard something. Footsteps. Faint but unmistakable, retreating down the sidewalk. I sprinted toward the sound, but by the time I reached the street, whoever, or whatever, it was had vanished. I checked the camera. Footage. This time there was more than a blur. A figure. Not clear, not solid, but there. Watching. Desperate, I installed floodlights and another camera. The ringing continued. One night, frustrated, I walked to Mr. Donner's abandoned house. It had been empty since he died. The front door was locked, but the back door, it creaked open. Inside, dust coated every surface. The air was thick with an old, musty smell. In the living room, a single chair faced the front door, like someone had been sitting there, watching. A cold shiver ran through me. Then, from outside, the doorbell rang. I couldn't hide it anymore. I told Rachel everything. The blurred figure, the footprints, the feeling of being watched. "This is crazy," she said. "You're not sleeping, you're paranoid." "I'm not making this up, Rachel." Her voice rose. "Then what do you want to do, Martin? Move again? The kids need stability. I need stability." I ran a hand through my hair. "I just need to know what's going on." She shook her head. "You're chasing shadows." That night I slept in the living room waiting for the doorbell. It rang at 2:46 a.m. I opened the door, and for the first time, I saw him. He stood at the edge of the porch just beyond the light. Thin, frail, almost translucent. Mr. Donner. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air around me grew colder. My chest tightened. Then, like a flicker in the dark, he was gone. The doorbell never rang again after that night. But something stayed with me. A feeling. Sometimes late at night I still wake up expecting the sound. I still check the porch, half expecting to see him standing there. Rachel and I don't talk about it. She pretends it never happened. Maybe that's for the best. But some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind moves through the trees just right, I swear I can still hear the doorbell ring. I never liked the building on 10th Avenue. It was wedged between two sleek high-rises, a relic of another era, its brick facade cracked like old skin. It had been standing there since the 1920s, the kind of place where the floorboards creaked and the pipes groaned late at night. But it was cheap, and after my divorce, cheap was what I needed. Apartment 4B had been sitting vacant for months before I moved in. Mrs. Ramirez, the building's super, said the last tenant left suddenly. She had this way of saying things like she knew more than she let on. At the time, I didn't care. I just needed a place close enough to Daniel's school so I could see him on weekends. Daniel was 7, too smart for his own good, full of questions I didn't always have answers for. He had his mother's sharp mind and my stubbornness. Our arrangement wasn't perfect, but I did my best. Every Saturday morning, I'd pick him up from Sarah's place in Brooklyn and bring him back to my apartment in Manhattan. We'd spend the day playing board games or watching old cartoons before I dropped him back off Sunday evening. That Saturday, morning started like any other. I was in the tiny kitchen of 4B making grilled cheese for Daniel while he sat at the rickety table, his legs swinging beneath him. There was a heaviness in the air, like the apartment was holding its breath. I didn't notice it at first, but by the time I poured my coffee, the feeling was unmistakable. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, shaking off the strange tension. Daniel nodded, focused on peeling the crust off his sandwich. Dad, why does your apartment feel tight? I frowned. What do you mean? Like, like when you go up too high on a roller coaster and your ears pop. I smiled, trying to ease whatever weirdness he was picking up on. Maybe. The building's just old. It creaks a lot. He didn't seem convinced, but he let it go. After breakfast, I walked him downstairs and buckled him into Sarah's car. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. She asked if he ate well, if I checked, his homework, if he'd gotten enough sleep. We were civil, but there was always a weight between us, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other too well. Back upstairs, the apartment was silent. I rinsed my coffee mug and placed it on the counter before heading to the bathroom. When I came back, the mug had moved. Not a big move, just a few inches to the left. But I knew I hadn't touched it. I frowned, picked it up, and set it back where I was sure I left it. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I just thought I put it in one place when I hadn't. That night, I woke up unable to move. My chest was tight, my arms and legs pinned down by an invisible weight. My heart pounded in my ears. The darkness in my bedroom wasn't just dark, it was thick, like something was watching me from the corners. I forced my breath steady, my mind screaming to move. Then, as suddenly as it came, the pressure lifted. My body jolted upright, gasping, like I had just broken through the surface of deep water. In the morning, I found a bruise in the center of my chest. A perfect, circular mark, as if something had pressed down on me all night. Daniel noticed it when I picked him up the next weekend. Dad, what happened to your chest? I ruffled his hair. Just a bruise, buddy. Probably rolled into something in my sleep. He hesitated, then said, "Did the bald man do it?" I froze. What bald man? The one in the corner, Daniel said matter-of-factly. The one who watches me when I sleep. I should have laughed it off. Kids have active imaginations, right? But something about the way Daniel said it, so casual, so sure, made my stomach turn. The bald man? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. What does he look like? Daniel shrugged, taking a bite of his granola bar. I don't know, he's just standing there, doesn't move. Just watch. I forced a smile. Maybe it's just a dream, bud. Daniel wrinkled his nose like he didn't quite believe that. No, 'cause I wake up and he's still there. I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to tell him he was imagining things, that his brain was playing tricks on him. But deep down I knew better. That night I sat up in bed long after Daniel had fallen asleep in the next room. I kept the lamp on, my eyes darting to every shadow, every dark corner of the apartment. It felt like the air was pressing in on me again, thick and unmoving. The ceiling fan spun lazily, but the room felt still. At some point, exhaustion took over and I must have dozed off. I woke up in the same paralysis as the night before. My chest was pinned, my limbs useless. My eyes darted around the room, heart hammering. The darkness felt heavier than before, pressing down on my skin like an invisible force, and then I saw it. A shape in the corner of my bedroom. It wasn't just darkness, it was something darker than the dark. A void, standing just at the edge of the light from my nightstand lamp. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was looking at me. I tried to move, to scream, to do anything, but I was locked in place. My breathing came in short gasps. The thing in the corner stayed perfectly still, like it was waiting. Then, just as suddenly as before, the pressure lifted. I gasped and shot upright, clutching my chest. My skin was clammy with sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. The corner was empty. I staggered out of bed, flipping on every light in the apartment. The bathroom, the kitchen, the hallway. Nothing. I even checked on Daniel, who was sleeping peacefully in his room, curled up under his dinosaur blanket. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just sleep paralysis. A trick of the mind. It had to be. Then Daniel woke up. He shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Dad? Yeah, bud? He looked up at me, his face still groggy with sleep. Did you see him too? I nearly dropped my coffee. See who? "The bald man," he said, yawning. "He was in my room last night." I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean?" Daniel sat down at the table, chewing absently on a piece of toast. He was standing in the corner, just like always. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I set my mug down. "Daniel," I said carefully, "how long has he been there?" He shrugged, swinging his legs under the chair. "Since I started coming here." The apartment suddenly felt colder. I crouched down beside him, forcing a smile. "And he doesn't talk to you?" Daniel shook his head. "No, he just stands there. Sometimes he moves closer." My throat went dry. "Closer? Yeah." Daniel took another bite of toast. "But only when you're asleep." I didn't sleep that night. After Daniel's casual admission about the bald man moving closer while I slept, my mind wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him, standing just out of reach, waiting. At 3 a.m., I gave up trying. I sat on the couch with my laptop, the dim glow of the screen the only light in the apartment. If something was really happening in 4B, there had to be an explanation, something logical. I started with old tenant records. Most of that information wasn't public, but I found a few old rental listings that mentioned previous occupants. The last person to live in 4B was a man named David Kovat. The name meant nothing to me at first. No major news stories, no missing person reports. Just a guy who had lived in my apartment before me. But the deeper I dug, the more unsettling it got. Kovat had been a high school teacher, taught history at some public school in Queens. But 4 years ago, he was suddenly put on administrative leave. The school never released details, just said he was being investigated. Investigated for what? That's where the trail went cold. There were no charges, no trial, nothing in the news, just silence. Then a few months later, he died. The official cause of death? Blunt force trauma due to an accident. But there were no car crashes, no falls, just a brief, vague mention. In a coroner's report, body found in apartment crushed under unknown force. Crushed? I sat back, my stomach twisting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. A ghost story? A murder mystery? I nearly jumped out of my skin when my phone buzzed. One new message from Sarah. I sighed, rubbing my temples before opening it. "Sarah, Daniel has been acting weird since he got home. Did something happen at your place?" I hesitated. I wasn't about to text her about ghosts and sleep paralysis. "Me? What do you mean?" Her response was almost immediate. "Sarah, he won't sleep in his room. Says some man was watching him at your place. Kept crying, wouldn't tell me more. Had to let him sleep in my bed." I exhaled slowly, my pulse hammering. Daniel wasn't the kind of kid to make things up just to get attention. If he was scared enough to break down at his mom's place, then something had terrified him. I didn't respond. Instead, I got up and walked to Daniel's room. His bed was still messy from the night before, his stuffed dinosaur half buried in the blankets. The small lamp on his nightstand was still on. I hadn't turned it off after checking on him. And then I saw it. The closet door. It was open. Just a crack. I knew for a fact that I had closed it before he left. My skin crawled. Slowly, I reached out and pulled it all the way open. Nothing. Just Daniel's small row of clothes. Some toys stacked in the corner. Nothing out of place. Except for the floor. There were faint indentations in the carpet, like someone had been standing there for a long time. A sharp knock on my door made me spin around. My heart nearly shot out of my chest. It was 4 a.m. Who the hell was knocking at 4 a.m.? I moved cautiously to the front door and peered through the peephole. Mrs. Ramirez. I hesitated before opening the door. She stood there in a robe, her silver hair messy like she had just rolled out of bed. Her face was serious. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Saw who?" She sighed. "Mr. Kovat. He's still in there, you know." I felt ice crawl up my spine. What do you mean still? She gave me a tired look, like she had told this story before and knew it wouldn't be believed. He never left. He can't. I stared at her. You're saying his ghost is haunting my apartment? Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. Not a ghost. Something worse. I felt a chill creep over me. What happened to him? She looked past me, into my apartment, like she was searching for something. Then she lowered her voice. He thought he could balance it, but it doesn't work like that. Balance what? I asked. She just shook her head. Be careful, Mr. Aldrich. The more you notice him, the more he notices you. Then she turned and walked back down the hall, leaving me standing there, in my open doorway, staring into the darkness. I didn't go back to sleep after Mrs. Ramirez left. I just sat on the couch staring at the open closet door in Daniel's room, thinking about what she had said. The more you notice him, the more he notices you. Was that why Daniel saw him first? Because kids are more perceptive? Or had he always been here just waiting for someone to pay attention? By sunrise, I had made a decision. I needed answers. Mrs. Ramirez wasn't in her office, so I knocked on her apartment door instead. She answered quickly, like she had been expecting me. You want coffee? She asked, already turning back toward her kitchen. I hesitated before stepping inside. Her place was small but neat, with religious icons on the walls and an old radio, playing low Spanish music. The smell of brewed coffee filled the air. She poured 2 cups and sat across from me at the tiny table. So, she said, you want to know about COVID? I nodded. What did you mean last night? About balancing? She sighed, stirring her coffee. He was a strange man, kept to himself, but toward the end he was always nervous. Kept asking me if I ever felt the air get heavy in the apartment. I didn't know what he meant, not back. Then, I swallowed hard. I know what he meant. She gave me a knowing look. Of course you do. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet. I could hear the faint tick of her wall clock, the distant hum of the city waking up. She took a sip of her coffee before speaking again. Kovet said there were rules for living in 4B. I thought he was crazy, but maybe he wasn't. I leaned forward. What rules? She raised a finger. First, never sleep with the lights off. He only moves in the dark. My stomach twisted. I thought about all the times I had woken up in pitch-black paralysis. Second, she continued, don't leave anything open. No closet doors, no cabinets, no drawers. I felt my blood turn cold. Why? She hesitated. Because that's how he moves, through spaces. You leave something open, and he gets closer. I gripped my coffee mug tighter, trying to steady myself. The third rule is the most important, she said. You can't let him think he's already won. I frowned. What does that mean? She exhaled slowly. Kovat used to say that he wasn't being haunted. He was being tested. He believed the thing in your apartment needed something from him, something heavy, and if he gave into it, he'd lose. I thought about the bruises on my chest, the pressure, the feeling that something was watching me, waiting. She met my eyes. You understand now? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I do. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then you need to be careful, Mr. Aldrich, because I think he's already started testing you. That night I followed the rules. I turned on every light in the apartment before the sun even set. I double-checked that every door and drawer was closed. I sat on the couch with a hammer in my lap waiting. Nothing happened. By 2 a.m. my eyelids were getting heavy. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't let me relax. Then, just as I was about to nod off, the bedroom light flickered. Once, twice. Then it went out. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, heart pounding. The room was empty, but when I turned toward the bathroom, the door was open. I knew I had closed it. The air in the apartment thickened, pressing in on me like an unseen force. The light in the hallway flickered next. Then I saw him, standing in the bathroom doorway. He wasn't just a shadow this time. He was there. Tall, gaunt, skin stretched too tightly over his skull. His eyes were sunken, empty pits, his mouth slightly open as if he were gasping for air. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then he spoke. A whisper. "You're in my bed." The air in the room collapsed around me. A crushing weight slammed into my chest, pinning me to the couch. My phone slipped from my fingers, the flashlight rolling away. I gasped for breath, my vision blurred. It felt like my ribs were going to snap. Then, just before everything went dark, the bathroom door slammed shut. The weight vanished. I sat, up, choking for air, my entire body shaking. The apartment was silent again, but I knew deep down that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My chest ached from the crushing pressure, my breath still uneven. The apartment was dead silent, but I knew he was still here, watching, waiting. I thought about what Mrs. Ramirez had told me, about Kovat, about the rules. I had broken them. The lights had gone out. The bathroom door had been opened. And worst of all, I had acknowledged him. He had spoken to me. "You're in my bed." What the hell did that mean? At sunrise, I made a decision. I wasn't staying in 4B another night. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and headed straight for Mrs. Ramirez's door. She answered with tired eyes like she already knew why I was there. "I need to know everything," I said. She sighed, stepping aside to let me in. "You're not the first person to say that." We sat at the same small table, the radio playing softly in the background. "You said Kovat was being tested," I began. "Tested for what?" She hesitated, staring at the steam curling from her coffee cup. "Have you ever heard of a debt that can't be paid?" I frowned. "What kind of debt?" She looked at me, eyes dark with something I couldn't place. "Some people carry something heavy with them, a guilt, a weight, and sometimes something comes to collect." A chill ran through me. "You're saying Kovat owed something?" She nodded. "I think he did, and I think it crushed him." I thought about what I had read. Kovat had been investigated at his school, but nothing ever came of it. No charges, no details, but that didn't mean he was innocent. I swallowed hard. "And now it's trying to collect from me?" She didn't answer right away. Then she shook her head. "No, I don't think it's about you at all." My blood ran cold. I suddenly had the overwhelming urge to get to Sarah's house. I barely mumbled a goodbye before rushing out the door. Sarah's apartment was in Brooklyn, a 30-minute drive from mine. I broke every speed limit getting there. When I arrived, I pounded on the door. Sarah answered, looking exhausted. "Jesus, Robert, what? Where's Daniel?" I demanded. Her expression changed. "He's asleep. What's wrong?" I pushed past her into the apartment, heading straight for his room. Sarah followed, protesting, but I barely heard her. Daniel was curled up in bed, his small frame rising and falling with steady breaths. I let out a shaky exhale. He was okay. Then I saw it. The closet door. It was open. My heart stopped. I rushed forward, grabbing Daniel and pulling him into my arms. He stirred, mumbling sleepily. "Dad?" I held him tighter. "Did you see him?" I whispered. He was quiet for a second, then groggily. "Yeah." I pulled back to look at him. "Where?" Daniel lifted a small, sleepy hand and pointed, not to the closet, to the reflection in his window. My breath caught. In the glass, just behind me, a tall, bald figure stood in the doorway, watching, waiting. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Robert, you're scaring me. What the hell is going on?" I swallowed, trying to steady myself. "We need to go, now." She frowned. "Go where?" I didn't have an answer. I just knew we couldn't stay here. Then Daniel spoke again. "He's not mad at you, Dad." I turned back to him slowly. His eyes were barely open, still half asleep. "What?" I whispered. Daniel's voice was small, matter-of-fact. "He's mad at me." A cold, suffocating silence filled the room. I felt like my body wasn't my own, like I was floating outside of myself. "Why?" I finally asked. Daniel blinked sleepily, like the answer was obvious. "Because I wasn't supposed to be here." I felt my stomach drop. Sarah looked, between us, confused. "What is he talking about?" I couldn't speak. I knew. 7 years ago, when Sarah told me she was pregnant. I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I told her that. I told her maybe we shouldn't have the baby, but she had insisted. She had fought for him. And in the end, we had Daniel, a son I had almost refused, a son I had almost taken away. Something inside me shattered. I looked at Daniel, my son, my perfect little boy, and I knew. That was my debt. I had been tested, and I had failed. Because in my weakest moment, I had wished him away, and something had been listening. Something that doesn't forget. Something that doesn't forgive. Sarah was still talking, asking questions, but I couldn't hear her, because behind me in the window's reflection, the bald man was smiling, and Daniel was laughing.